Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a pretty comprehensive stack of sources today, looking at the Black Billionaires Report 2025. And this deep dive, well, it isn't just about listing names. We really want to decode the pathways,
hmm
understand the industries, how these empires were actually built.
It's an essential analysis, I think, because the top line numbers themselves are pretty stark. They give you immediate context. The sources state there are currently 23 black billionaires globally. Combined net worth around $96 billion.
Right. And when you compare that to the nearly 3,000 billionaires worldwide,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's less than 1% of the total. Stark is the right word.
Exactly.
So our mission for you, listening in, is to try and move beyond the headlines, the celebrity stuff we often see. We want to see the actual engines creating this wealth, find those aha moments, especially when we compare the U.S. approach to wealth building versus what's happening in Africa. Very different stories there.
And what's really fascinating, I find, is the diversity in how this wealth was built, which often gets missed.
Yeah, the media loves the entertainment fortunes, right? But the report argues pretty strongly that let's call it the true backbone, lies in these less visible sectors, things like essential manufacturing, private equity, tech infrastructure. So we're looking not just at who is wealthy, but how they did it.
Oh.
What does that tell us about opportunity?
Okay, let's start with the U.S. then. But let's bypass the usual celebrity focus for a moment. Let's go straight to the engine room, the quiet titans,
Huh.
the ones with the highest net worths who aren't famous for being famous.
Yes, the foundational builders.
Yeah.
Their strategies are, well, quite different from what dominates social media feeds.
Right. So we've got Robert F. Smith, pegged at $12.2 billion, and David Stewart, who actually leads the American list at $12.8 billion. If you look at Smith's path, chemical engineer first, then Goldman Sachs investment banking. That led to him founding Vista Equity Partners in 2000. And the mechanism there is just crucial to understand. Vista isn't really playing in the consumer space. They invest heavily, strategically, in enterprise software, data, tech-enabled businesses. Basically, the software that companies need to run.
So it's very B2B.
Exactly, business to business. It lets Vista take this long-term view, use leverage effectively, and really scale up software companies that are already proven. It's quite removed from, say, the ups and downs of consumer trends. It's strategic private equity focused on improving the core operations of the companies they buy. That delivers the returns.
And that kind of strategic wealth allows for these huge philanthropic actions, like the Morehouse College gift in 2019, paying off all that student debt, $34 million. That's wealth operating on a massive scale.
Absolutely, a direct consequence of that accumulated capital. Then you've got David Stewart, Worldwide Technology, or WWT. He co-founded it with just, $250,000? And today, WWT is this huge player providing tech products, complex services, supply chain solutions, mostly to Fortune 500s and government agencies.
Yeah, the sources put WWT's annual revenue at over $17 billion. That makes it one of the biggest private companies in America. And a key part of that story is Stewart keeping majority ownership all these years.
So let's connect the dots. What does this tell us? A huge chunk of the wealth on the U.S. list is being generated in these really foundational sectors. Technology infrastructure, sophisticated finance. The common thread seems to be high-value B2B services. They're selling utility, efficiency, infrastructure, not just consumer appeal.
Which is a key contrast, right? Because the report did note that historically, like back in 2021, something like 2/3 of American black billionaires had ties to entertainment.
Exactly. So the biggest fortunes now seem to be shifting, or at least the top spots are held by those operating more behind the scenes.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about that pivot. The athletes, the artists. The report is super clear on this. They're billions. They rarely came just from their salary or performance fees. It was the business moves, brand ownership, and crucially, equity. They had to pivot from being paid talent to being owners.
That's the absolute core of it. Leveraging that fame, that platform, into actual ownership in a different venture, that's the pivot point.
Take Rihanna. $1.7 billion. This was to say almost all of that is from Fenty Beauty. She co-owns it with LVMH, right? And her genius was seeing that huge gap in the market for inclusive cosmetics. $100 million in sales in like 40 days.
Unbelievable launch. And she owns 50% of Fenty Beauty, plus, 30% of Savage X Fenty lingerie?
Yeah. So she didn't just endorse a product. She built and owned the brand, turned her cultural capital into a massive consumer goods company.
And Jay-Z, $2.5 billion. He's really the masterclass in the portfolio approach, isn't he? It's complex. You've got the spirits brands Armand de Brignac, the Douce Cognac deal, Roc Nation, his entertainment company, plus those savvy early investments like getting into Uber early, reportedly worth $70 million at one point.
He treats his career like a business portfolio, building a corporate structure around his initial fame, always focused on ownership stakes, not just the quick payout.
Yeah. Then you look at the sports icons who also figured out ownership. Michael Jordan, $3.5 billion. His story is really about the incredible long-term power of brand licensing.
The Jordan brand. It generates over $3 billion a year for Nike, even now. And he gets a huge chunk of that through royalties and profits from a deal made decades ago. Plus, selling the Charlotte Hornets for $3 billion.
Yeah.
After buying it for $275 million. That's just phenomenal appreciation on an owned asset.
Absolutely. And LeBron James, $1.2 billion, he explicitly followed that kind of playbook, didn't he? Taking equity stakes. In his Spring Hill company, Fenway Sports Group, even Blaze Pizza.
Right. It's that strategic choice. Do I take the endorsement check now, or do I take a piece of the company and bet on its long-term growth?
He chose ownership. The slower burn, potentially much higher reward.
And we can't forget Magic Johnson, also $1.2 billion. He was a real pioneer with his business model, investing specifically in underserved urban communities, movie theaters, retail. That Starbucks partnership was huge. He sold his stake for over $100 million, I think.
Yeah, he demonstrated there was enormous value locked up in those markets that others were overlooking. Smart, targeted investment.
And Tyler Perry, over $1 billion too. His model, 100% content ownership, all those TV episodes, the movies. He owns the library.
Which leads to an important takeaway, right? For people starting out in entertainment or sports, the path to that billion-dollar level seems to require this fundamental shift. You have to move from being paid for your talent to being an owner. Owning the IP, the distribution, the brand itself. If you're just earning a salary or a fee, however high, there's likely a ceiling. Ownership is what scales.
Okay, let's pivot now geographically. Because the difference in how wealth is built in Africa, according to these sources, is really striking. The biggest black fortunes globally, they're not built on media or software. They're built on essential, heavy industry.
Yeah, this is where the scale just becomes immense. It reflects the specific needs and opportunities within emerging economies. Aliko Dangote from Nigeria, richest black person globally, $23.9 billion.
And his strategy with the Dango Group was, well, incredibly effective. He identified things Africa absolutely needed: cement, sugar, fertilizer, oil refining. And instead of just importing them, he built the local capacity to manufacture them. That $19 billion Dangote petroleum refinery, it just shows the sheer scale we're talking about, industrial empire building.
Exactly. And you see that pattern repeated with other major African fortunes listed. Mike Adenuga, $7.1 billion. He started in oil, con oil, but then diversified massively into telecoms with Globacom. 60 million subscribers, that's huge reach.
Wow.
And Abdul Samad Rabio, $5.5 billion, with his BUA group, again, cement, sugar, commodities. That same focus on local production of essential goods.
So if we step back and look at the bigger picture again, the U.S. list shows concentration in finance, tech, media, specialized B2B services, while the African list is dominated by those building the actual physical and increasingly digital infrastructure: cement, telecoms, energy.
It really reflects different economic landscapes, doesn't it? Different market demands, different routes to capital accumulation. What it takes to build massive wealth looks very different depending on the region.
Definitely.
And while we're talking global scope, we should probably pause and just note the significant gender gap here. It's quite stark. The sources really only list Oprah Winfrey and Rihanna as the primary black women billionaires. Sheila Johnson is also estimated over $1 billion now. But still, only 3 globally, all U.S.-based. Building wealth at this scale, it seems, remains an exceptionally difficult challenge for black women worldwide.
That's a really important point to underscore. Okay, so wealth isn't static, right? The list changes. Let's talk a bit about that dynamism. We see recent additions, like you mentioned, Sheila Johnson, co-founder of b.e.t, who successfully pivoted into hospitality, sports ownership, diversification, and Harriet Tabuteau, bringing a whole new sector to the list: biotech, focused on neurology research. That shows expansion.
Right, new industries, new pathways opening up. But there's also volatility, and that's crucial too, especially for fortunes tied closely to a personal brand or specific deals. Look at Kanye West. His status has been, well, up and down. He lost the billionaire tag in 2022 when the Adidas deal collapsed due to his controversies. His wealth was heavily reliant on that single partnership. The sources suggest he's reportedly back on the list for 2025, but it highlights that sensitivity.
Yeah, very sensitive. And similarly, P. Diddy's financial situation is now really uncertain, isn't it? With all the ongoing legal issues impacting his assets, his business deals.
Exactly. Brand value and partnerships can be fragile. And even someone like Beyoncé, who earns incredible amounts from tours and music, the sources suggest she needs more diversified, owned ventures, perhaps like Jay-Z or Rihanna have built, to consistently stay above that billion-dollar mark long term.
It really drives home that difference between massive income and durable asset ownership, doesn't it? Even Robert L. Johnson, who founded BET and was the first black billionaire back in 2001, isn't on the current list due to later business challenges.
Absolutely. So if there's one core lesson for you, the listener, to take away from all this, it's that strategic shift, moving from earning high salaries or fees to owning equity, controlling the intellectual property, controlling the supply chains, whether it's enterprise software like Robert Smith or beauty products like Rihanna or cement plants like Aliko Dangote. Ownership. That seems to be the bedrock.
Yeah, ownership is the foundation.
Yeah.
These sources really map out a fascinating global picture of different strategies, but that common thread is scaling up ownership. Okay, we actually had a request from a listener to go through the entire list, name by name, which I think is a great idea. It respects the achievement and highlights the full scope covered in the sources.
Sure, let's do it. It helps to see the whole picture laid out. Maybe we can tag team it. Rapid fire.
Sounds good. Okay, starting with the United States, 15 individuals, according to the sources we reviewed. David Stewart, $12.8 billion. Technology.
Robert F. Smith, $12.0 billion. Private equity, tech.
Oprah Winfrey, $3.7 billion.
Media.
Michael Jordan, $3.5 billion. Jordan Brand, sports ownership.
Kanye West, reportedly $2.7 billion. Music, fashion.
Jay-Z, $2.5 billion. Music, spirits, investment.
Rihanna, $1.7 billion. Cosmetics, fashion.
Adebayo Ogunlesi, $1.7 billion. Finance, infrastructure investment. Nigerian American.
Magic Johnson, $1.2 billion. Investments, sports ownership.
LeBron James, $1.2 billion. Sports investments, media.
Tiger Woods, $1.2 billion. Golf, endorsements, investment.
Sheila Johnson, estimated 1+ billion. Media co-founder, hospitality.
Harriet Tabuteau, estimated 1+ billion. Biotechnology.
Alexander Karp, estimated 1+ billion. Software, Palantir Technologies. Note, Karp's inclusion as a black billionaire is sometimes debated due to mixed ancestry, but some sources list him.
Okay, moving to Nigeria, 4 individuals. Aliko Dangote, $23.9 billion. Cement, sugar, oil refining.
Mike Nuga, $7.1 billion. Telecoms, oil.
Dulcimad Rabiu, $5.5 billion. Cement, sugar, commodities.
Femi Adedola, $1.8 billion.
Energy, investments. And then other Africa and global individuals, 4 more. Patrice Motsepe, South Africa, $3.2 billion. Mining, investment.
Strive Masiyiwa, Zimbabwe, $3.1 billion. Telecoms.
Tony Elumelu, Nigeria, $1.4 billion. Banking, investments, Heirs Holding.
Ibrahim, Sudan, UK, $1.1 billion. Telecoms, Celtel founder, investments.
So that's the list of 23 based on the source compiled for 2025.
Quite a list, covering a lot of ground geographically and industrially.
It really does. Which brings me to maybe a final thought for you to mull over. We see the immense concentration of capital needed to build those industrial empires in Africa, the Dangote model, based on physical commodities, massive infrastructure. So the question is, in today's digital economy, what are the pathways to building truly foundational wealth? Wealth that can compete and scale and impact with those traditional manufacturing and commodity monopolies. Can digital infrastructure, data, software create empires on that same massive essential scale? That's something to think about.